You used the term before, servant leader. When did that become your leadership style?
The whole purpose of servant leadership is really about seeing the world through their eyes and making them capable and strong to take care of our services and our promises to the customers. So the biggest thing is dropping your baggage of the past and embracing the new. It doesn't mean that you give up your learnings. What it means is that you use your learnings to help create a new future. We'll all go through failures. A positive, culturally purpose-driven team owns up the failures, learns from it, and bounces back. And those are times when, as leaders, we got to step in, communicate, listen, fix, debottleneck, take care of people. Belief, action, result. The more you work on belief, you get the right action. And as a result, you get the right result. And then it becomes like a flywheel. And I think, that's where Amaysim is today.
Vir, welcome to the show.
Hi, great to be here.
Really looking forward to the conversation. We spoke a few weeks ago. You talked a lot about kind of personal development, and I think you used the word reinvention when it came to your own sort of personal journey. So what does reinvention mean to you?
Well, it's been a great journey so far. Started off from a very humble background where the solid middle-class values of being simple, high integrity, hardworking, meritocracy were kind of ingrained in. And as I went through my education and my uni, every opportunity, I think when I look back, whatever I have grabbed has challenged me and explored new dimensions. So I started off in the kids industry where on a Christmas Eve when people were with their families, I was in a toy store, taking care of the parents for the last minute gifts which they had to give to the kids. And the joy of small kids picking up a Barbie and the twinkle which they got in their eye told me that, one of the most important parts of being in business is really learning empathy, which is looking at the consumer, looking at people from their eyes. And I think that was, a big lesson. And as I, kept moving forward, my team actually trained me a lot. So I had a very seasoned team, and they trained me into becoming who I am. And I pride myself to be a servant leader, working with people, working for them, and ensuring that all of them, kind of be at their best. And I think that's the reinvention which you need to keep going as you keep exploring multiple experiences, multiple people. You have to keep adjusting and learning to really enable them and power them to be their best.
You used the term before, servant leader. Where did that sort of philosophy come from you? When did that become your leadership style?
In businesses, successful businesses, being customer obsessed is the key mantra. But really, the teams which serve our customers, which take care of them, they are the real heroes. They live the brand. They live the company. And the more you're able to work for them and make them the superheroes, the better are the results. The better is a relationship which is built between consumer and the brand, the consumer and the service. And hence, the whole purpose of servant leadership is really about seeing the world through their eyes and making them capable and strong to take care of our services and our promises to the customers.
How do you embed that kind of culture and that way of thinking into an organization, especially a large one? I know you've led a number of those.
Yeah, I've been privileged to be part of a large organization back in India where we had 15, 20,000 team members working for our services. And what was so important is that while each one of them is unique, at the same time, how do you have a purpose-driven, simple, clear, what to do and how to serve kind of a culture? And that's where the rituals become really important. What do you do? How do you do? And how do you repeat that? I would differentiate that between a process and a ritual, where ritual has a lot more EQ in it, a lot more empathy in it, a lot more heart in it, versus a process where it is defined 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I think that lends itself to a bit of creativity. It lends itself to be more unique. And when you start practicing these rituals again and again and again, you build a very strong foundation, a very strong culture. And then that shows up in your brand, in your promise to consumers and to your fellow team members as well.
Interesting. I've not heard that distinction before, a process and a ritual. Could you give us an example of a ritual that you swear by, like it's absolutely key to what you do?
So there was a time when I was heading Airtel stores for about 2 years. And what do you do when you start your day? What do you do when you open a store? You could give them a process of saying, check, 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 right? And when you've got to do that every day for the next 365 days, it's not the most exciting thing to do. Yeah. But when you turn that into a ritual, when you create a lot of energy, when you bring heart into that, and you call that, it's a huddle where you're talking about what did we do well the previous day, what did we learn, how are we going to be the best today. So it's like the back room where you energize and you look at the team as one team. I think that is a ritual which helped us kind of build purpose and clarity every day amongst thousands of teams. So really transforming a process into a ritual becomes more engaging, more interesting, and it's not something which you're doing for the sake of doing, but you're living it. And then you start making a huge difference.
Yeah. And you mentioned there turning a process into a ritual, but it can go the other way as well, right? And I'm reflecting on some of the stuff we've done that were rituals and probably now have become processes. That's actually a real loss, and it does negatively impact culture.
Yeah, and the biggest differentiator today amongst many things are table stakes today. Many, many things are table stakes. But really the difference between brands and services is how people show up together as a team, how people show up to consumers, within the team members. And I think that's where the differentiation starts. That's where the culture plays a big thing. And I'm really, really excited about, the big jump which I took from moving from India to Australia. And I'm part of this wonderful team, which is the team Amaysim. We are one of the largest MVNOs in the market. But really, we are very small from the way we look at our business. We are like a startup. The way we show up every day, we try to punch beyond our weight. We want to be purpose-driven, which is the courageous customer champions, looking at what's the best we can do to make our consumers love us. And the more I engage with our consumers, the more I get feedback. I'm really, really excited with, the direction which we are heading. When we spoke to our consumers, they said that, well, I actually signed up for the service because one of my friends asked me to, or my family asked me to, And that virality is something which you cannot buy. That's something which happens when you put your heart in the service. And to put the heart in your service, you can't ask people to just follow a process only. So you have to be compliant, you have to follow. But I think when you put the heart, it's the culture which plays into the, your service.
What was it that attracted you to make the move from the role you were doing in India? You'd been with that company for a long time, seen a lot of success. What was it that attracted you to Amaysim?
So I've been like a telco dinosaur, I think, for the last 25, 27 years, and been through multiple roles in India, multiple geographies. It's a place where if you travel 200 kilometers, you often get into a new country where you have a different dialect, you have different cuisine, you have different kind of clothing and different weather. And when I got this opportunity to look outside of India, I said, yeah, why not? Let's go for it. Let's go and challenge yourself, get into a place where you've never been before, get into an organization which is new, teams are new, culture is new. The way of doing business is again something which is new. It's almost like restarting. To give you a sense, I even had to get my new driving license.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a restart. And, when you restart, it brings in a lot of fresh energy. I think I went back maybe 10 years or 15 years in my age, felt a lot more energized, a lot more younger, and a lot more looking forward to, great new experiences.
So you land in a new company, new country, new team. How do you go about, I guess, assimilating with the culture you find while also putting your mark onto it? How do you maintain that balance?
I think that's the power of being trained in servant leadership. The first part is about just listening, the capability of being with people, of listening to them, of learning, of being a student, of empathizing and understanding, what happens, what are the differences, and then having the power to really learn from the past and, work with them to create a great future. So the biggest thing is really dropping your baggage of the past and embracing the new. It doesn't mean that, you give up your learnings. What it means is that you really use your learnings to help create a new future. And that's really powerful.
And where do you see the biggest opportunities for Amaysim? What are you most excited about for the company and the industry?
I think, the best part is that Amaysim lives in the best of both worlds philosophy, which means that we're part of Optus. So we really pick up the best things from Optus. And we are a bunch of, start to be possessed, crazy people wanting to, offer great, simple things to consumers. And when you bring the two together, you create that magic. The other day I was in the store walks, catching up with a few customers in supermarkets. And I said that, hey, I'm from Amaysim. And I had 2 or 3 consumers walking up to me. They said, we are part of Amaysim. We love it. And thank you if that helps you. And, who says that I love my telco in today's world?
That's true, yeah.
So there is some magic, which the team has created by being really simple. And we see this joy and purpose-driven connections. We look for value-driven customers, people who are looking to make those choices. And I think we do a good job in terms of attracting that. No wonder we have one of the finest NPSs. We have the lowest complaints, in the industry. But we want to get better and better. And that's the hunger. So just a few quarters ago, we've been largely a mobile organization. We've stepped into NBN business with a view of saying that if our consumers love us so much, why don't we make them, another offer of picking up home broadband and mobile from us? And then a little bit of devices. How do we keep simplifying and giving them a lot more value products? And we've had a good response so far and looking forward to creating more and more Amaysim consumers, families, and homes.
I can see as well, you mentioned NPS scores and things like that. And I imagine that, if you've got a happy and an engaged workforce, that's going to drive those things. A lot of executives are talking about culture, which is great. One of the challenges with culture is that sometimes it can feel a little bit intangible. Do you measure it? And if so, how do you measure it?
I don't think there's a metric which measures culture. It's about the vibe and the feel which you get. And for me, the biggest measure is that when the leaders are not around, how is the team behaving? How are they operating? And I think that's where the culture comes into play. It's like a family. How do your kids behave when the parents are not around? That's the value system, and that's the culture of the family. And I think that's how we are. So we hold each other accountable. So, for example, when we start our internal leadership meetings, the first thing which we do is check in. How are we doing today? Because the context becomes so important, and that's a ritual. Yeah, where we know that, okay, he's having a bad day, or she's getting troubled by someone. So let's give that space to the team. So I think all of those become really important. So culture is really how you show up, how you behave, and if there is something which you feel is out of place, have those conversations, those courageous conversations with people and teams to ensure that we stay around. But I think the other piece is also about a culture add, which is not being just stuck in the past, but how do you evolve so that we're able to thrive in the new world? How do you, keep yourself open? You embrace new things, you embrace new values, you embrace new behaviors, which are more relevant from a future perspective. So I think that's the other growth mindset, which we weave into our culture.
What's a culture red flag that you've seen that tells you that something might not be going quite the way you want it to go?
I think one of the things which I'm conscious, and which our leadership team is conscious, is when we start blaming someone else for a failure. We'll all go through failures, right? And a positive, culturally purpose-driven team is a team which owns up the failures, learns from it, is resilient, and bounces back. Yeah, and anything which is away from that is something which is like a red flag. And those are times when, as leaders, we got to step in a lot more, communicate, listen, fix, debottleneck, take care of people. If I were to, look back at a model which is called as belief, action, result, and that's something which I learned a few years ago. The more you work on belief, you get the right action, and as a result, you get the right result. And then it becomes like a flywheel. The result kind of, solidifies your belief. That again leads to the right action and to the right result. And that becomes such a virtuous flywheel. And I think, that's where Amaysim is today.
You mentioned before wanting there to be a kind of growth mindset within the team. I certainly feel that with the rate of change that's kind of going on around us, that growth mindset could be what kind of makes or breaks the business. How do you foster that within the team?
I think there are, for any business, there are things which you do for today, and there are things which you have to invest for tomorrow. And as long as you have your eyes on both, you are heading in the right direction. So you got to ensure that we have enough time, space, people, resources to continue to learn and grow. To give you an example, when we were trying to get a new campaign out in the market, it had to be, quickly done. We're one of the values which we pride of is being agile. And we said, yes, we will make that campaign happen really fast. Got the products aligned, got the comms aligned, got the base aligned and everything. And then when it had to be promoted, we said, how do we quickly get our media campaign, our TV campaigns up? We were lucky to have, someone having been through a course on AI on video, and a bunch of 2 or 3 people really got together and said, let us create a quick advertisement for us. And that's where they put all their, thoughts together, put their skills together, and quickly created an AI-generated ad, which we went live with in about 10 days' time at 1/10 the cost. And overall, it gave us huge, bump up in terms of awareness, in terms of our business, and it really did well. I think that's the mindset, the growth mindset, the challenger mindset, which helped us, or which will continue to help us to beat the odds. I'm really proud of the team, and I'm really, really stoked by the fact that how, the folks came around and made this happen. This couldn't have happened if it was like a direction. It happened because you felt like doing it. That's the culture.
Yeah. You've alluded to this a little bit already, but in your view, how can this culture that you're building give Amaysim a clear competitive advantage in the market?
I think it all starts with understanding the consumer and understanding what are the unmet needs, what are the things which they want. And then when that's embedded into the culture, then we're able to come up with services, communication, products which serve them. Ultimately, it's the same SIM which gets used across the world, it's the same spectrum, it's the same handsets, but what makes the difference is that how. And I think that's the execution. So to my mind, how you execute a strategy is really where culture comes in.
How do you learn about the consumer? How do you get that information that you need?
Oh, there are, as a telco, you have lots of feedback which comes in our call centers, in our chats. You go out and engage with consumers. You get feedback from your research panels. And I think investing time to listen to your consumers is one of the most important aspect of any business. And as telco, we are blessed because we get to hear a lot more. And any service industry, you will get to hear a lot more. But usually, David, you won't get up in the morning and say, hey, let me call up my AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile call center and call them and say, hey, you guys are doing a fantastic job. You won't do that, right?
No.
So you would want things to work perfectly fine. And you really call up when there's a problem. And the difference between the good and the great is really where you're listening with a view to solve, not only for them, but solve for all. And I think that's where our empathy steps in big time.
What do you think other companies get wrong when they're trying to build a high-performing culture? What mistakes have you seen made in the past?
Yeah, I think, I've been through a journey of all the highs and the lows. I've seen when I have failed, and I've seen how, we've succeeded. And clearly, when you're focused just on results and somehow achieving those results, what gets me worried is if there are shortcuts, if there are things which are not being followed, and you're getting the number, you're getting that top line or bottom line for the sake of it. Yeah. So you may get that for the next quarter or the next few quarters, but eventually you will lose out. And I think, organizations understand that, make those corrections, and the future-looking organizations are always trying to balance, the current and the future. So you're always trying to get the right strategy, right? You may not have the best strategy, but if you have great execution of that strategy, you can make a huge difference.
What advice would you give to executives, entrepreneurs who want to build a purpose-driven culture, but they're not sure where to start? What would you say to them?
I think the starting point is just listening. It's always about engaging and listening. And if there is a conversation where you're doing more talking than the other person, then clearly you're not doing a great job. So this is the time when you ask the right questions, but have the patience to listen. And some of that may not be music to your ears. So having the courage to accept that, and having the courage to listen to things which you're not comfortable with, is a very important, facet of leadership. And then, of course, whatever you may hear, eventually having the courage of doing the right things, of bringing in integrity into, whatever you do, becomes really important.
Yeah, I think, like you said, being able to listen and hear the hard things as an entrepreneur, CEO, leader, if you're not able to do that, you end up with the wrong information, and then you end up making the wrong decisions, and that can literally bring down everything you built.
Yeah, and to my mind, any feedback is a blessing, because you don't otherwise receive feedback. So really getting into a safe space where you can get feedback from consumers, get feedback from your colleagues, from your team members, I think that's one of the most important times for you to think of what's the course correction and how do you reinvent yourself. And I think those are the times when I have built myself. The time when I've heard from consumers, when I've heard from my leaders, when I've heard from my colleagues in terms of what I could do better and what we could do better.
We're all human. Sometimes when we're sat in those conversations and things get a little uncomfortable, we may react, we may defend ourselves. What advice would you give to people to ensure that they allow that safe space to remain safe?
That's one of the toughest behaviors to train yourself on. And the moment you start defending, you're actually stopping the conversation, and you're stopping honest, authentic conversations from happening. So that's the time when you have to really pause, suspend that thought of defending, of immediately reacting or trying to correct, because then you're not going to get honest feedback. And to my mind, you have to be smart and clever enough to understand whether some of these things are, if they're honest and authentic. And these are things which you then pick up as hypothesis and go back and test. Because it's not that everything is something which you start acting upon. So that as an executive, as a leader, kind of assimilate and really go back and pick up the important threads of going back, testing, and putting that back into the teams and market.
We have a tradition that we do at the end of the podcast where we ask all our guests the same two questions. So the first one is, what's one thing that you've changed your mind about recently and why?
I think one of the things I always, when you started off, was about getting it right. And it was about getting the strategy right. So you would put in a lot of effort in terms of getting a very, very thorough strategy. And what I realized over a period of time was that you may have the best strategy, but if you're not able to execute it well, it's job poorly done. So you might have a simple, cohesive, bold strategy, but what you really need to work on is execution. Are we measuring the right things? The how of that becomes so important. The feedbacking of that becomes so important. So I think that's a big shift to my mind. And then whether you achieve 99% or 101%, is immaterial. Because when you have a team which is working shoulder to shoulder, which is purpose-driven, which is courageous, then you always are going for bold, lofty goals and almost often missing them.
It's really wise and clear the way you put that forward. And I also wonder, maybe I'm speaking from personal experience a little bit. I think as a CEO, it's very tempting to be very engaged with the strategy. Quite often that's the kind of the interesting bit, the bit where we can use our imagination, and quite often we can then maybe offload the execution, perhaps not give it the focus that it deserves.
That's true, actually. And, that's a common miss at times where you're so much in love with the strategy and then you can't figure out why we're not, achieving what we wanted to achieve.
And the second question, what's one thing you've not changed your mind about and is a kind of core belief that you hold dear that you'd want to share with others?
I think, one of the things which I've zeroed on is work on belief and you will get the right results. So you have a goal in your mind, but the how becomes more important. And to get to the how, the why becomes very important. And hence the purpose is what you need to be very clear about. It's the energy, You can go and create an energy and you can keep creating that again and again. But the energy which comes from inside, when you are self-actuated, self-motivated, every day you're coming up and showing up, it happens because you are so in sync with the belief that this is why and this is how I'm going to do it. So this is the why and this is the how. And, that then is a very, very powerful force forward to go and achieve whatever you want to.
What a perfect way to end the conversation. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you for being so authentic and wise is the word I would use, Vir. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks for all your questions and thanks for making me really reflect a lot. Thank you.
And there we have it. Vir Nath, the VP at Amaysim. What a phenomenal conversation. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, or leave a comment. More importantly, if you know someone that could benefit from the wisdom that Vir shared with us today, please share the episode. I'm David Jepson. See you again next time for CEO Behind the Scenes.